Good morning. Today you're expanding on your knowledge of exponents beyond what you have done before. So in the past you've done where you have an exponent and it just tells you how many times to multiply the same thing. And in the case of a number, you would evaluate that. Today we're going to go a little bit further. So today we're going to look at what happens when you have an exponent outside parentheses. And so what that means, it's called powers to powers. So what that means is your exponent on the outside tells you how many groups, and then inside the parentheses tells you what is in each group. So this x squared to the fourth power tells me I have 4 groups, and in each group I have x squared. And then you would simplify that like normal. Now, if you wanted to, you could write out all the x's, but at this point, that's not necessary. So when you evaluate this, if you were to write out all those x's, you would end up with 8 of them, so your final answer is x to the 8th. So again, the exponent on the outside is how many groups you have, and what's in parentheses is what is in each group. So here's another example. So I'm going to have 4 groups, and in each group I'm going to have 3x squared. So it's going to look like this. 3x squared, second group, third group, and fourth group. So at this time, it may be helpful to look at what the directions say. If they say exponential form, then it is okay to just write this as 3 to the 4th and then x to the 8th. If they tell you to simplify, then because you can do 3 to the 4th, you want to do that. So you would have 81 x to the 8th. And again, just like the other day, you're going to notice some shortcuts and patterns. The other thing you're going to look at today is when there are exponents in fractions. And just remember that fractions are division. So if I have something like 3 to the 7th over 3 to the 3rd, 3 to the 7th looks like this, 3 to the 3rd looks like this. Now, if you recall, 3 over 3 is a giant 1 because 3 divided by 3 is 1. So you've got a 1, and a 1, and what you're left with is 3 to the 4th, so that is your final answer. The good part about that is you can use these exponent patterns to make these numbers much easier to deal with, because you really don't want to do 3 to the 7th power and 3 to the 3rd power and then divide, when you can just simplify it like this, and then you would already know that your answer is 81. If you have variables, same concept applies. So x to the 5th, x times x times x times x times x, and then you've got x squared on the bottom. You have 2 giant ones here, and so you're left with x to the 3rd. Okay, now sometimes they will mix regular fractions in with your variables. So just imagine, because this is multiplying, you can kind of separate this into 9/12 and then x squared over x. So you can deal with that 9/12 like a regular fraction. So you can simplify that fraction, which is 3/4. And then x squared over x looks like this. Have a giant 1. There's an x left over, so then put your x. I like to put my x either with the numerator or right next to the fraction. Just be careful that it's not written down below. Sometimes you will have fractions that are bottom heavy, meaning that there's more x's in the bottom. So when that happens, be aware that since these are 1s, you basically have 1 times 1 times 1 on the top, and that is 1. And then since it's bottom heavy, your x squared is in the bottom, so it's going to look like that. Another thing that can happen is you'll have more than one variable in a problem. So you'll have like x to the fourth, y over x to the third, y to the fourth, something like this. So if that happens, same thing applies like I did with the fraction before. You can separate it, and that's only because this is all multiplication. If there was a plus or a minus sign in between there, you can't do this. And then you can do your y's separately. So x to the fourth over x to the third. And you're probably going to get to a point where you don't have to write this out every time. But for today, you might want to just write it out. When in doubt, write it out. And that gives you an x. Then you've got y over y to the fourth. Which gives you a 1 over y to the third. So for your final answer, you're going to have x on the top, y to the third on the bottom. I tried to keep this short because I know some of you wouldn't be willing to watch something longer than this, but feel free to go back and watch it again or send me an email or a question. Thank you for your cooperation with all the substitutes. Have a good day.